Today on the trans agenda, your directive is to get yourself a little treat. If you're transgender, today you need to get yourself a little treat. It can be a snack, a beverage, a nap, perhaps a small doodad, some small thing that makes you happy. Today's optional directives include drink lots of water, eat at least 2 meals, wear something cozy, make some time for something that makes you happy, say hi to someone that you care about, say at least one nice thing to yourself, and conquer at least one small country. Keep your transgender brain chip tuned to ensure that you receive the next directive. And remember, world domination starts with self-care. Now you go and enjoy that treat, you little cutie patootie. Mwah!
Good news, everyone! Tonight, Ohio's healthcare ban denied. Trans wins, in court and in competition, and more. Good news starts right now. The 10th District Court of Appeals in Ohio struck the state's ban on trans health care for youth, which itself is amazingly good news. But the way they did it, you're going to love this. Back in 2011, Obamacare was the top culture war issue on every Republican's tongue. How dare the federal government suggest that every citizen has a right to health care? What nerve suggesting the poors might deserve to not die from easily preventable illnesses or suffer for years from treatable diseases? So they took steps. Stern steps. Powerful steps. Very strongly disapproving steps. They passed the Ohio Healthcare Freedom Amendment. Just like everything the GOP does, the name is the opposite of the actual function, which added to the state constitution 2 critical items. First, no federal, state, or local law or rule shall prohibit the purchase or sale of health care or health insurance. 2, no federal, state, or local law or rule shall impose a penalty or fine for the sale or purchase of health care or health insurance. Now, the Republicans at the time were very proud of themselves. They'd done something to undermine the Affordable Care Act. President Obama sure would make a sad face when he found out about it. Good job all around. Fast forward to today, when the court pulled up the state constitution and said, see here where it says no state law can prohibit healthcare? Isn't that what this is? You trying to enact a state law that prohibits healthcare? Well, the state attorneys were flummoxed for a time because while denying true things is technically GOP party doctrine, but the judges wouldn't be swayed by simple declarative denial, and at least one of them knew it. I know, one of them exclaimed, probably. Let's try to argue that trans healthcare isn't really healthcare, so that part of the Constitution doesn't apply. Brilliant! Good job all around. So they assembled the usual experts, those pedigreed men with impressive names that they fly in from around the world to offer very expensive opinions before state legislatures all over the country. Men whose names you might know. Paul Roos, James Cantor, Stephen Levine. The experts testified, and the court listened. What they heard was that, according to the published ruling, that Dr. Cantor, quote, is not a physician, has never practiced as a licensed clinical psychologist in the United States, is not licensed to treat patients under the age of 16, and has never provided treatments to patients under the age of 16. Dr. Hughes got a similar treatment, the court noting that, quote, he never diagnosed or treated a patient with gender dysphoria, and citing his written testimony in a previous paid gig where he opined that allowing trans kids to live was a form of child abuse. Dr. Levine, however, got off with less severe burns. That because he did have some degree of genuine qualifications, and because of that, he was compelled to testify that he cannot support a categorical ban on healthcare because trans healthcare is healthcare with proven beneficial outcomes. Oops! Meanwhile, the other team had actual experts. 22 organizations who deal with trans kids every day and see the good healthcare does, and the harm withholding that care does. They include the Pediatric Endocrine Society, the Society for Adolescent Health and Medicine, the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and over a dozen more. It's true the state's sole semi-credible witness had already made it clear trans healthcare is healthcare, and therefore the state constitution applies, but getting extensive and unanimous verification from people who actually do have expertise in this area of medicine never hurts. So the court ruled that A, trans healthcare is healthcare, and effective, necessary healthcare at that. B, since the state constitution prohibits bans on healthcare, this ban is unconstitutional. C, there is no alternative means of treating transgender youth, which wasn't strictly necessary, but is nice to have as a matter of settled law. And D, additionally, parents have a fundamental right to seek medical care for their children, which is also lovely to have on the books. Not only is this ruling good news for restoring access to healthcare for Ohio's trans teens, but it also established anti-trans former doctors haven't got a leg to stand on, reasserted as a matter of law that gender-affirming care is both real and vital, added to parents' rights, and did it by way of a tool Republicans themselves put in place out of sheer spite for a past president. I guess, thanks, Obama, and thanks to the judges. Magnificently done. Following up on last week's story about the trans military ban, another federal judge has issued a temporary order blocking the Air Force from terminating 2 trans service members. As was reported previously on TransPositions Weekly, U.S. District Court Judge Reyes has instituted a preliminary injunction on Executive Order 14183, the order that infamously called trans service members dishonorable and disloyal, among many other things, noting that it is blatantly discriminatory, unsupported by any evidence, and, quote, soaked in animus. In spite of that injunction, the Air Force was continuing with the expulsion of the 2 airmen named in this case, Master Sergeant Logan Ireland and Staff Sergeant Nicholas Bade. Both were removed from their postings despite having served with distinction and were slated to be involuntarily separated this week. Jennifer Levi, a senior director at GLAD Law, one of the several organizations involved in this case, said, quote, these airmen have risked everything to protect American freedoms. They deserve better than becoming the targets of a calculated political purge. In granting this new order, U.S. District Judge Christine O'Hearn wrote that both plaintiffs demonstrated both a likelihood of success in challenging the ban and the risk of irreparable harm, including loss of career, damage to their reputations, and violation of their constitutional rights. Quote, The loss of military service under the stigma of a policy that targets gender identity is not merely a loss of employment. It is a profound disruption of personal dignity, medical continuity, and public service. While Pentagon officials told Judge Reyes in D.C. that separation actions would not begin until Friday, March 28th, Ireland and Bade were scheduled for termination proceedings Wednesday the 26th, hence the need for immediate injunctive relief. Staff Sergeant Bade said in an interview, quote, "For 6 years, I've strived to embody what Americans expect from their military: expertise, character, and leadership. Now I've been prevented from serving the troops I mentor and the nation I've committed my life to protect." Master Sergeant Ireland, a veteran of 14 years, had been involved with a training mission in New Jersey when he was interrupted with an order to leave the base and placed on administrative leave. His absence leaves his team, based in Hawaii, without a leader. One of many gaping holes in the U.S. military this incompetently executed ban has created for no reason other than prejudice. Quote, "We're cutting off our nose to spite our face," one veteran wrote. "Military excellence and readiness, my ass." As Ireland pointed out, quote, "Thousands of transgender service members like me fill critical roles requiring years of specialized training. Removing us creates dangerous operational gaps across every theater." Fortunately, for the time being, the courts are working hard to protect the service members who protect the United States, despite the best efforts of the current president and Secretary Hegseth to cripple our military. A few weeks ago, New Zealand resident and beefcake Mark Miramet became a world champion bodybuilder. He's a man who accomplishes goals. He dreamed of living in New Zealand and did it when he moved from the Netherlands in 2009. Dreamed of serving in the military and did that in 2014, once he met the country's 5-year residency requirement. While he waited, he pursued his transition. Mark has said in past interviews that not only did he know as a child, everyone else did too. His siblings introduced him as, quote, "more of a brother," and his parents gave up on trying to get him to behave or dress like a girl in early adolescence. By age 35, he'd reached a point where he couldn't put it off any longer and described the process as not something that worried him, but a great relief. Quote, "I just had to transition," Mark told Stuff magazine in 2020. "It was really hard trying to be a girl when I'm not." He also became the first, and at the time only, person to transition before joining the New Zealand Defense Force. For the first few years, nobody knew. Mark said, quote, "You don't transition to tell everyone you transitioned. You want to be yourself." That changed in 2019 when the Defense Force announced an exhibition to celebrate 25 years of the organization being GSM inclusive. Mark sat for photos and recounted a bit of his story for the effort. He said he's become more open because he's realized people need more education on this topic, and being visible is the first step. Since retiring from the service, he wanted to become a bodybuilder. Now, he's a world champion. For his next goal, he said he wants to be a positive role model for transgender athletes. He told the press of New Zealand, quote, "I don't do it for the stage. I work out because it's good for my mental health, and I enjoyed the structure and the routine." It was 32 weeks of competition prep and cutting and dicing and training twice a day. Competing was literally the icing on the cake. And I enjoyed that after as well. He won the over 50 men's fitness division in Canberra, Australia, after winning regional and national competitions in New Zealand earlier in the year. It is a class of bodybuilding that focuses on leanness, muscle symmetry, and looking like a men's fitness model rather than how big one's muscles are, although muscle development is still important. Mark wanted to motivate others and encourage those with negative perspectives about transgender people in sports to think differently. He's become passionate about challenging stereotypes, especially surrounding trans people and what the public thinks we should look like. Mark said that when people find out he's trans, they often seem surprised, saying something like, "Wait a minute, you are just as much a guy as we are." Quote, "You can do whatever you want to do with your life," he said, referring to having missed out on many opportunities while growing up due to the lack of trans role models, a gap in public awareness he hopes to help fill for others now. Quote, "Sport is extremely important for people's mental health, connection, and being linked to the community," he said. While in the Defense Force, he had become a psychologist, and now he uses those skills to coach others at the University of Canterbury. Quote, "You can achieve more than you think. Like, I never thought I would ever make it to a world stage. It's not about winning a world title. It's about your mental and physical wellness on a day-to-day basis, and you can do that in any type of sport. It's so important that anybody can just engage in sports," he said. "It's a little bit of my duty to get the word out for a younger generation coming through to know that they can be included." Quote, "Transgender people have all the right to live with pride in society," said Minister Bindu at the Varnapakittu Festival in Kerala last week. Varnapakittu translates in English to vibrant colors, which is a fantastic name for a trans culture festival. This year marks the 4th festival, which highlights and promotes creativity and expression for transgender people of every flavor. The Ministry of Social Justice considers the event to be critical, both for the community, which is facing so much strife in recent years, and for India as a whole, which benefits from this patch of vibrant color in its social tapestry far beyond words. Like every nation so gifted. Bindu said one effect of the festival is changing society's mind about culture being based on binaries, which don't actually exist in nature, and the increased visibility also increases acceptance of members of this vulnerable group. It is easy to hate the unknown, but harder when you see the humanity. Kerala takes the well-being of trans citizens seriously, the first province in India with an actual transgender justice board within the Ministry of Social Justice, and several of the board's members spoke about various programs available to trans people, between performances by groups of dancers, musicians, and among a sea of artists and crafters of all kinds. Among these are a student benefit, financial assistance for those recovering from gender reassignment surgery, and Minister Bindu announced plans for a transgender crisis intervention center in Ernakulam, saying the center will function as a combination helpline and shelter, providing much-needed support in 2 critical areas. We've talked about the trans community in India a few times on this program, so now is a good time to mention that while India still has problems with how society interacts with trans people, there has been a positive effort to make things better, and they're pulling way ahead of the United States in this, like in so many other areas. For example, India enacted the Transgender Persons Protection Act back in 2019. 6 years ago. This act includes the right to self-ID, the right to updated documents, discrimination protection, and the creation of a National Transgender Council to advise the government on matters relating to trans people and our well-being, among other things. That's not to say it's all cupcakes and roses. While Indian culture has acknowledged trans people exist for thousands of years, the traditional social structure placed us as outcasts by and large. That's why events like this festival are necessary, and why it's so wonderful to see trans people given the chance to stand up, stand out, and shine. The following is based on an essay by Faye Seidler, Community Uplift Program Manager at North Dakota's Harbor Health Initiative. I've made minor edits for clarity and for the wider audience, but I think you'll find the spirit of the message inspiring. Somewhere lost in the cultural scuffle of what it means to be transgender is that it is an absolute joy to experience the world in such a way. When you take away the societal prejudice and extreme political rhetoric, what remains is something amazing and beautiful. Across so many cultures, throughout all of history, trans people have been honored, celebrated, and revered. While the world looks scary for people who are trans, it's worth acknowledging that there have never been so many parents who love and accept their trans children. There has never been better medical research on treating trans youth or access for those youth to get care. There is so much more literature, education, science, and hope than there has ever been before. That may seem strange given the hundreds of laws and handful of executive orders that attempt to snuff out the light that is trans people. But still, there have never been more of us out in the open, because this is the first time everyone in the nation knows what it means, and for once, people don't grow up spending decades confused about why life doesn't make any sense. We grow up with the language to describe ourselves, even if we can't tell anyone else. We know why we feel so out of place. The reason for all of those laws is a top-down political bullying attempt to enforce a culture that people largely don't agree with. All of this effort is necessary as a desperate attempt to cling to an anti-queer sentiment of yesteryear. And despite all of that, anyone who is compassionate can clearly see the hate. Anyone who is scientific can easily see how the bigot's house of cards falls. And at the end of the day, when the moral panic runs its course, culture will realize that the dangerous gender ideology was the anti-woke crowd burning minorities at the stake. Yet, that is all big picture stuff. Life is getting better for some, and getting a lot worse for others. With as many kids as there are in loving homes, there are a significant number of kids who struggle to survive day to day, who grow up around a culture that tries to tell them they're wrong or confused or evil, who feel alone and afraid. What's lost in the discourse of trans topics is often trans people. We are part of every group. We are of all political parties, races, faiths, jobs, and communities. There is no singular feature or belief universal to all of us except a shared experience of not fitting into the box assigned at birth. That is the big crime that has generated 5 years of constant think pieces, political attacks, and executive orders. So, from now through Trans Day of Visibility, March 31st, allies and organizations are raising the flag. Participation is simple. Allies are encouraged to change their social media pictures to the trans flag, so trans folks everywhere can see that despite the negative rhetoric from lawmakers or the federal government, there are people who love them and want them to be happy. And the bigots will see too, which might just start to clue them in to how far in the wrong they've sunk. If you enjoy content like this, make sure to subscribe. Transpositions Weekly is the first and only weekly trans news show in the universe, and we need your support to keep this show going. Contribute at patreon.com/thetranspositions. Spread the word all over social media to let people know we're here, and tell us what stories matter to you by joining the community on Discord. Discord, of course, is where the memes live, and our meme of the week was posted by Triceratops. And if you want to be invested with divine powers to reshape the heavens themselves, join us. Also, if you have good news concerning trans people you'd like to see reported on, you can tell us about that in the Discord as well. For the Transpositions, I've been Ember Belrad.
I will always, always, always stand up for the dolls. Always. Till my dying breath. And I will never understand the girls that don't. I truly think that trans women are the best of us. The best of us. And not only do I not think that they take anything away from my experience as a cis woman, I think that they are actually one of the purest forms of womanhood. And highlight some of the most beautiful parts of womanhood. Because what do you mean that in our patriarchal society, you are going to throw away all of the privilege that you have as someone that was born a man and choose girlhood, even when it means you have a life expectancy of 40 and you instantly become the most at-risk woman in your society? Because they're exactly right. I would choose my girlhood at knife point every fucking time. And the fact that we have a group of women who are all risking their own personal safety just to have the gumption to say, no, I am a woman and here I am, and we're not standing behind them in unison is crazy to me. Like, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I will always stand behind the dolls. Like, they're not stupid. They see how y'all are treating the other trans girls, and they're still coming out. Every day we get a new one, and it's fucking beautiful. They're still choosing girlhood. Even in the fucking face of all of this. Despite all of the horrors, they're still choosing girlhood. I think they're the best of us. How does any woman see someone fighting that hard to be one of us, and your gut reaction is to call them a man? No, babe. They're more woman than you will ever be. They had to fight for their life in order to call themselves one.